My name is Kyle Learman. I work in the White House Office of Public Engagement, and I run the Champions of Change program. So first, just a big welcome to all of you. Thank you for coming, and thanks to those of you who are joining online. To kick things off, I just want our Champions of Change to come up to the stage. Grab your seats or stand behind the podium. So champions, why don't we give them a round of applause? Grab your seat if you're... So each week, we bring in a different group of ordinary Americans who are making a difference in their communities across the country. This week, we are celebrating champions that are connecting the Americas, so it's a particularly special group, and we're really excited to have them here today. To kick things off, I'm going to introduce Ricardo Zuniga, who is the Senior Director for Western Hemisphere Affairs in the National Security Staff. So Ricardo, come on up. Thanks very much.
Well, first of all, I think we all want to get to the main event, which is a celebration of the Champions of Change. But I wanted to say welcome to the White House, bienvenidos, and we're really happy to have you. It's actually very fitting that we're doing this now. This is a president who's really dedicated himself to building partnerships throughout the Americas. And the people who are here, what we're commemorating here, are the people who've taken that and turned it into a reality. Turned it into concrete projects that affect real people's lives. And I think that's the most important element that they bring to the table, in addition to the energy, the drive, the commitment to improving the lives of ordinary citizens in the United States and in their countries from which their families come and from which many of them come themselves. We see our job in government as creating an enabling environment that allows these kinds of leaders, these kinds of groups, these kinds of committed individuals to thrive. And the beauty of it is that we're seeing results right away because of the work that they were already doing and because of the environment and the energy, again, that they're bringing to their communities here and abroad. What I would say is probably the most important single element is something that the president's very dedicated to, which is having citizens feel like protagonists in their own home countries, in their own communities, in their own basically international environment, which is what this really is now and what we're really bringing to the fore. So I'm going to introduce Chris Balderston, who has a very long and distinguished history of doing exactly this kind of work in Congress, at the White House, and at the State Department. And without further ado, Chris, please come on up and carry on.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ricardo, and thanks, everyone. How many people here were at the State Department Diaspora Forum? I'm just trying to, I always wonder if I want to repeat our message. But, you know, it's always an honor to be in this building. It's historic. I got to work here for 6 years, and I always remember every single day I walked in here. It was a very special place, and you should all kind of wander out slowly and take a look at the building and think of the decisions that have been made here over the last 100 years. It's an amazing place. And it's wonderful to be here to help celebrate this outstanding group of diasporans who've contributed so much to our country. They're truly amazing individuals that are promoting progress and prosperity in their communities. You know, this week we had our second annual Global Diaspora Forum with the Secretary hosting it. And we brought together 500 people, that's more than we had last year, from 50 different countries. And I wrote a note to the Secretary the day after she spoke and said, you know, it's hard to believe that the State Department in its 220-year history hadn't thought of doing this before. And thank goodness, though, we have a Secretary and a President that incentivized us to do this. And I think that is very important. There are subtle things in this building you learn. We were just talking about you take on the attributes of the leader of an organization, and the fact that President Obama has created this Champions of Change program and Secretary Clinton has created this diaspora effort is not a small item. And, you know, I use these numbers, and you've heard them all before. Over 60 million first and second generation Americans who should be part of our process of new statecraft. They should help us shape the development agenda in emerging and frontier markets, and they win the hearts and minds of people around the globe. The problems we're facing are far too big for any one department, any one country, any one foundation or company to work on and solve. We have to bring everybody together. We have to collaborate. You know, one of our things that, one of our items that we set up to collaborate, and Ricardo mentioned the president setting up an enabling environment. The enabling environment that we really wanted to create at the State Department this past week, and we announced it last year and we're moving forward with it this year, is something called IDEA, the International Diaspora Engagement Alliance. And I keep repeating it over and over, and I hope you go back and repeat it home, because we have to find more people to get involved in this. This is a public-private platform where people can come together. Kathleen Newland from the Migration Policy Institute's in the back. Talk to her if you're interested. We need to create this public-private platform for people in this room, champions of change, to be able to access other champions of change. We cannot get this done in the government alone. Those days are over. We need to bring everybody together with a platform where they can do entrepreneurship and volunteerism and innovation and all of the things that we're trying to do at our diaspora effort. So through the Alliance, as an example, what we did was we created an idea. We had a Caribbean idea marketplace. And it's a business competition sponsored by our friends in Canada and the United Kingdom and the United States, along with a number of private sector people, the Inter-American Development Bank, Scotiabank, Digicel, and other partners. And it came up, we're offering $1 million in matching funds to finance innovative entrepreneurial proposals from the Caribbean diaspora. I might add, there are more Caribbeans living in the United States than in the Caribbean. And it's true, and we need to mesh that. And we want them to create jobs and economic growth in the region. And by the way, we're accepting applications in that program until July 31st of this year, so you just have a couple more days to do that. And on Wednesday, we announced, in conjunction with this effort, the creation of La Idea, our Latin American marketplace. And we want medium-sized entrepreneurs with the support they need to grow into successful businesses that create jobs and value throughout the region. This competition is a result of a partnership, again, people who see that this change could make a difference. The United States government, Univision, the Inter-American Development Bank, Accion, WellSpace, and Boom Financial. So there's no shortage of opportunities for collaboration on the horizon. Our future depends on how well we translate good ideas into action. We could all have wonderful ideas, but until we come together, you know, I often joke that the State Department has been known for 200 years for our ability to translate between languages. You know, that's still a wonderful thing, but we need to start translating between business and government and business and NGOs and foundations. We've put people in the same room, they don't quite understand each other. They don't understand each other's motivations. So we have to create platforms like this to bring people together in a trusted network to feel comfortable working with each other. You know, we have to take advantage, I've said this over and over, we were at the Mali event last night, we have to take advantage of the diversity of America. This is our big strength. You know, again, I said last night, I've had the chance to travel around the world in this job, and I'm thankful for that. The most interesting places in the country are the most diverse places, and they're the most innovative and creative. And you know, Raul and others can give you statistics on how many of the entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley are foreign-born. Over nearly half of the CEOs. So, you know, this is something we want to encourage. You know, in the end, I have to say, being in this building, the Obama administration and Secretary Clinton, they are leaders who want to bring more people into the process. They are inclusive. The more people that participate in the decision making, the better. And that's not always the case with a lot of presidents. And you can look down the halls and look at some of their portraits. But you know, but it's true. We want to be inclusive, and these are the new technological ways to do it. Because in the end, more inclusion brings more innovative ideas. So thank you all for your service. We're really looking forward to hearing about real, live, innovative catalysts for change. You know, we heard, if you haven't, I always plug Bill Drayton from Ashoka. Look up his website. He was at our conference. He talked about the importance of change makers in the world. He's got 3,000 of them now. Take a look at it and try to link up with them. And now I would like to introduce a great change maker at the State Department. Seriously, Roberta's laughing at me, but it's true. When I came to the State Department, I'm a political appointee, and you know, you meet the career officers, foreign service officers, and you know, Roberta immediately made you feel welcome. And she is our new Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs. And you know, I'm not going to go through her long resume of all the other things she's done at the State Department, but you know, she is an example of a creative leader at the State Department. And you know, I see Marta here. We would have never had Molly, the Mexican-American Leadership Initiative, which we created, without Roberta. I remember sitting in the room with Roberta and Fabiola and Scott, and you know, we didn't know where we were going the first day we met in that meeting. I can close my eyes and remember it. But you know, at least Roberta came to the table and said, let's figure it out. You know, let's move on. That does not happen in a lot of bureaucracies. So we want to try to find this constellation of activists in everything you do and we do, and we want to connect them through ideas like IDEA. So thank you very much, and Roberta Jacobson.
Thank you so much, Chris. Good morning, everyone. I'm so grateful to Chris for skipping the biography. It gets longer and longer, and all that means is I'm older and older. Let me start by just welcoming everyone here and saying that for me, it is really a great privilege to honor such remarkable champions of change from Latin America and the Caribbean. This is an unusual event for many of us who work in foreign policy. We don't often get the opportunity to talk with, to honor, and to showcase people who are working directly with counterparts, directly with people-to-people diplomacy every single day. And I'm fortunate to serve President Obama and Secretary Clinton as the Assistant Secretary in this hemisphere at a remarkably promising moment in the Americas that I think gets lost a little bit in today's news sometimes. I'd like also to welcome here our ambassador to Jamaica, Ambassador Pam Bridgewater, and her husband, Alfred Ackward. Thank you so much for being with us today and for all the work you do every day to bring change. These last few decades have been remarkable and a very special period in the Western Hemisphere. Periods of transition, transformation within countries, how they relate to each other, and how they relate to the United States. Our engagement in the region is deeper and broader than at any time in our history, and it involves civil society, the private sector, and just about every U.S. government agency. Secretary Clinton likes to talk often about the three legs of the foreign policy stool. And what she talks about is government actors like ourselves, the private sector and its catalytic effect, and civil society. And what she says very clearly is that without all three of those acting together, we can't succeed in improving the relationships among our countries. This hemisphere has a remarkably positive narrative these days, and you all know that because you're part of that narrative and you're part of achieving what's happened over the last couple of decades. Secretary Clinton also talks about the power of proximity, and she's talking partly about geography, but she's also talking about the proximity and the closeness that we have of shared values, all the more significant for all of us because of the diversity in the Americas. And those shared interests and the practical cooperation that we are achieving in this hemisphere, we focus around about four issues, four large themes. And they are greater inclusion so that society can benefit from the contributions of all citizens, something where we still have, frankly, a long way to go in this hemisphere. Security for our people on the streets, in their neighborhoods, in their homes, something that we know from public opinion surveys is among the most important concerns of citizens around the hemisphere. Effective and open institutions that meet our society's needs. The transformation and democratic growth in this hemisphere has been remarkable and has led the world in many respects, but it isn't over. And we have work to do in that area too, and also guarding to do against backward movement, unfortunately, that we've seen in the last few years. And finally, economic growth and greater trade, creating that opportunity that affords more people dignified and successful lives. But the most important throughout all of those themes and the most precious aspects of that power of proximity are really the ones that each of you embody in the work that you do every day. The profound human links between our societies and the power of exceptional individuals, one and many, to accomplish so much good and benefit so many people. Lest anyone ever think that one person cannot make a difference, today is designed to reassure us and inspire us again. The human ties in the Americas enrich our societies in so many ways, and our human links are vehicles for the transmission of values and cultures in both directions on a huge scale that shapes our societies and our futures. Across the Americas, you are leveraging those ties along with your own dignity, compassion, commitment, and imagination to produce practical results for people. And that includes the most vulnerable among us, which matters a great deal because, as Secretary Clinton and the President have recognized many times, our futures are increasingly interdependent. For the United States to succeed, our neighbors must succeed too. And as our societies join forces and our cooperation grows, we are building this platform that Chris talked about, in which our shared competitiveness and success can be broadcast throughout the world. A world where our human capital, resources, solidarity, and values represent our greatest comparative advantage. And each of you are part of that chain that links the local and the global in one of the most compelling and promising dynamics of our times. Other people throughout this day and previous have saluted your work for its human value, which is its most important measure. But as a diplomatic practitioner, I think it's also important to emphasize the impact that you and the communities that you represent have on the foreign policy stage, on the work that we try and carry out every day. Because your examples and your accomplishments are lighting the path for the future and not only making our job easier, but blazing new trails where we have not even been able to go yet. So I salute each and every one of you, and I thank you so much for being here today. We'll take one round of applause for everybody up here, and then I'm going to introduce them. I'd like now to introduce the folks who are our champions of change today, and I'm going to introduce the folks who are here with us and up here on the stage, as well as a couple who couldn't be here today. So I'm not sure if everyone can read placards, and some folks don't have placards, so I'm going to ask that folks at least identify themselves with a wave when I get to you. Luis Aguirre Torres is the founder and CEO of Green Momentum and Clean Tech Challenge Mexico, organizations that strive to promote, develop, and implement clean technology and green jobs in Latin America. The organizations have created a new ecosystem of collaboration and more than 1,000 green jobs. Claire Nelson is the founder of the Institute of Caribbean Studies. Under her leadership, ICS has fostered stronger U.S.-Caribbean relations via partnerships with the U.S. public and private sector, mentoring Caribbean American leaders, and promoting diaspora engagement in the development of the Caribbean. Andres Elmer Arias is the president of the Foundation for Educational and Cultural Development, which teams up with hometown Salvadoran associations in the United States and private companies to help public schools in poor areas in El Salvador with computers and basic infrastructure. I don't think he's going to have to raise his hand, but Greves Vasquez, everyone knows, is a professional basketball player for the NBA's New Orleans Hornets. Greves devoted much of his free time over the years to youth sports camps in Venezuela and partnered with the U.S. State Department's Sports Diplomacy Program. Alvaro Maldonado is the founding director of Ballet Teatro Internacional, a nonprofit organization that generates dance training programs in the U.S. and in Central America. These programs are aimed to inspire neglected, low-income, and undereducated youth. Ana Moraga, upon graduation from college, Ana moved back to Guatemala and founded MUJER, Mujeres por la Justicia, Educación y el Reconocimiento, Women for Justice, Education, and Awareness. For 5 years, Ana led the organization's efforts in opening spaces of empowerment for Central American women sex workers. Raúl Hinojosa Ojeda is an associate professor at the University of California, Los Angeles. Dr. Hinojosa founded the North American Integration and Development Center at UCLA, dedicated to projects empowering diaspora groups and development in home communities. Dr. Hinojosa also founded SF Global, LLC, which facilitates low-cost, secure, and accessible financial services to the unbanked and underbanked populations in the United States diaspora and their home countries. Not with us today, and I'm sorry they can't be here, are two more of our champions. David Ayllón. David Ayllón helped found the Mexican-American Leadership Initiative, a program of the U.S.-Mexico Foundation that enlists binational support to strengthen civil society in Mexico. Mali and the USMF have launched a people-to-people program assisting community projects and organizations in southern Mexico. David Ayllón serves as co-chair of Mali. And Patricia Janiot is the president of the Fundación Colombianitos, which is dedicated to helping Colombian kids who are living in poverty. Patricia has led the growth of Colombianitos from 42 children in 2001 to approximately 4,000 in several Colombian cities. These are all remarkable leaders, remarkable for the achievements that they have already accomplished and what we know is still yet to come. They are all very young. So another round of applause, please, for our wonderful champions. I don't want to keep you any longer from what are going to be great conversations with our leaders today, so I will thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to hearing from everyone today. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, so our champions who are standing can take their seats. They're on the second panel. If I can welcome Fabiola to the stage to moderate our first panel. Fabiola?
Good morning, everyone. I am Fabiola Rodriguez Champoli. I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Public Diplomacy for the Western Hemisphere, and I have the honor to work on the Robertas. So right now we're going to start the new the panel to talk to me. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here because I have been honored as well to know some of these people for some time. Dr. Nelson, Elmer. Someday I'll tell you the story about how Nelson saved an important event for us in Northern Virginia. I wanted to start by discussing the activities you do, Dr. Nelson. You and I have been talking a lot lately about how to work more in the Caribbean. And tell us a little bit about your research at the Institute of Caribbean Studies. What types of investments in the Caribbean should be promoted in order to build stronger ties with the U.S.? And I know you have a very specific project in mind that you and I have been talking about recently.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm very delighted to be here. Actually, the Institute of Caribbean Studies is 19 years old, and we have spent most of our formative years doing advocacy to create the space for the Caribbean American diaspora. During that time, for full disclosure, I had a full-time job at the Inter-American Development Bank, and I was also very engaged there in promoting the agenda on bringing to the fore issues of exclusion and making sure that the visibility of people of African descent in the Americas were more at the development table. Having said that, at ICS, we have been trying for the last 19 years, I think we have succeeded now, in getting the Caribbean American community to recognize their role as Americans. Many Caribbean people feel like they're going back home, so they've not been engaged in the policy process. And so over the years, we've been able to develop, for example, an annual forum on Capitol Hill, and more importantly, 7 years ago, we were able to get the US government to declare June as Caribbean American Heritage Month. So moving forward to actual work, one of the things we're very interested in is answering the question, who owns the Caribbean Sea? We believe that answering this question and looking at the future economics of the sea and all economic actors of the Caribbean Sea will ensure sustainability in the future. And we want, as Caribbean people, to have a role in leading that conversation. We believe that it's timely as people begin to do more undersea exploration, for example, and that's a conversation we're having. And we're also talking now to universities in the Caribbean and universities here about creating partnerships to do with the 100,000 points of light conversation that the president launched. So that's just one of the activities that we're engaged in right now, which I'm very excited about, bringing actors around the sea, the Caribbean Sea, together.
And Dr. Nelson, what are some examples of the development projects that the Institute of Caribbean Studies is engaged with right now, and what impact will they have for future generations of Caribbean entrepreneurs?
We are right now working on something called Life Seed stands for Skills, Empowerment, and Entrepreneurial Development. We are developing a project with the Deaf Village in Jamaica. We've been working with them for 2 years. They've allocated 5 acres of land for use. We are developing a partnership with Gallaudet University, and the idea is to get the Caribbean diaspora to invest in these deaf youth who, although they've been trained, they don't have jobs. And so I'm very excited. We're now at the stage where we have talked about the products we will launch. We're going to be doing crops that can do iced teas. And I have my eyes on the company called Honesty. So if anybody knows the guy at Honesty, please hook me up because I want him to kind of pre-contract my youth to buy the sorrel and the herbs and the moringa that they'll be growing on the land they own.
It's very interesting that you mentioned Gallaudet University because, as you mentioned, we're also working with the 100,000 Strong in the Americas initiative that President Obama launched. And Gallaudet University has been very aggressively pursuing opening centers in different countries in the region. Because in the countries in the region, there are no services, there are no higher education institutions like Gallaudet. So I believe in Central America, they're already in conversations with the government in Panama. They will be visiting Brazil in the future too, the president of Gallaudet, and I'm very happy to hear that you're working with them because the work they do is really very important, and they can make a change as well, making some change in the region. So now I'm going to turn to Andres. Andres, you created the Foundation for Educational and Cultural Development to partner with the private companies in order to improve public schools and basic infrastructure. What recent successes in your native El Salvador have you been achieving through this foundation?
Good morning. Thank you very much for this award, and I'm so grateful to be here. I want to start saying that 7 years ago, I went to the school where I used to go, and they started having a lot of problems with the games. And I was thinking, how can I help the school? So I started thinking, helping the schools with the computer labs, and that's how we started. I started working with the bank, which is a Banco Agrícola from El Salvador, and there was another foundation, PADF, that had some funds from USAID to invest in education. And we went and talked to the bank and tried to see if they can match the funds. And we started doing it. And it's been so successful that we start working with all the communities nationwide. There is about 500 organized communities in the United States, and so far we haven't been working with probably about 170 communities nationwide in the United States. And the way we do it, they put, actually the foundation, FUPEC, put 67% of the fund to build libraries, laboratories, and computer labs. The community in the United States has to raise 16%. The other 15%, it has to be the community back home, but they do it labor because there is no money over there, so they do it with the labor. And it's been so successful that we have done over 174 schools nationwide, which benefit more than 150,000 students. And then in 2001, I organized the Salvadoran Chamber of Commerce here in the Metro DC area, which, you know, there's a lot of Salvadorian here on businesses. So my idea also was to get the business people involved with the community, because it's not easy for the community to raise money doing the, you know, selling pupusas and carne asadas. So the business people start supporting these programs. And we started also productive projects, agriculture projects, something that can generate jobs and also bring money to their hometowns. And because in El Salvador, one of the biggest problems we have is most of the young people, they just wait to finish high school to come to United States. And that's wrong, because we have to create jobs so they can have the opportunity. So we're doing it through education, we're doing it through productive agriculture projects, and we're also helping the communities. And that's how, I've been working for many years.
Thank you so much, Elmer. And the fact that you were able to engage almost 200 of the 500 plus communities in El Salvador is a testament to what we call in Spanish your poder de convocatoria, which I have witnessed personally. I can tell you this guy, he picks up the phone and he'll get, half of the Northern Virginia community, Salvadoran community in a room for you. And so, Elmer, tell us a little bit more about what kind of impact have the computer labs had in the students in the communities in El Salvador? How are the societies and the communities changing thanks to the better equipped schools?
Well, with the globalization, in this small town, there's this student, they never have a chance to even touch a computer. And now they have computers, so they can go to internet and they learn how to use a computer. And not only that, there is a lot of schools, what they're doing is promoting these classes, computer classes, with the parents. So now we have the student using this computer lab during the daytime and the parents using it nighttime. So that really helped the students. And also, I'm gonna give you an example. One of the biggest schools in San Miguel is called El Instituto Nacional Isidro Menéndez. It has about 2,200 students. Because the problem with the games that we have in El Salvador, there were a lot of students that didn't want to go to that school because they were saying that that school has so many gang members. So what we did, the computer lab for the school, it was so beautiful, the room with the new computers, that the students start coming back to the same school. So the impact in the student is to have the opportunity to learn computers. In our country, we're still working, and I know I'm going to continue working very hard because there are so many schools that they need computer laboratories and libraries.
Thank you so much. Very impressive work. And now I'm going to turn to Gravis, who's, as Roberta said before, and he needs no introduction. And he has been kind enough to give some of his time to the Department of State, to the sports program as well, to go to his native Venezuela and do some sports clinics with underprivileged children. So what life lessons have you learned through basketball that have inspired you to serve the younger communities in your country?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you for having me here. It's such a privilege to be here sitting with all these champions over here. Well, basketball is my life. It's my passion. It's almost everything. Obviously, God is above all that, but I learned a lot. And one of the things I learned is that everything is possible in life. When I was young, I remember growing up in Venezuela, Caracas, Venezuela. I used to tell my friends, my boys, I'm gonna play in the NBA one day. I'm gonna get a degree. And when you're back home, you don't have too much access, and people laugh. My friends were laughing. Por favor. I don't think you're gonna make it at all. So I wasn't mad. I wasn't mad at all. But I was motivated, and I left my family when I was 17. I left my mom and dad. I came here to the States to reach my goals, and I went to University of Maryland. I had the greatest 4 years in my life. Never thought I was going to go through all everything I went through, good and bad. And I proved to myself that when you want to reach your goals and when you want to be somebody in life, you can do it, and you're the only person that can block yourself to get there. So therefore, I kept working so hard, and I knew I was close to my dream, which was making it to the NBA. Unrealistic. I'm not the most talented player, or the guy that can jump high or anything like that. But I'm a hard worker. So one thing I learned about basketball, if you do the right thing when nobody's watching, if you work hard, if you're a good person, if you go to school, get your education, good things gonna happen to you. So my senior year, I had the greatest senior year in school. We beat you. So I got drafted. I got drafted to the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, then, I had a great year playing the playoff. Then then I got traded to New Orleans. So now I'm playing for New Orleans Hornets. And it's so great just going back home and having contact with young kids, with that community. Because now my boys call me almost every day. It's like, gee, can you send me some shoes? Can you send me some shorts? Can you send me a jersey? And all that. And I do it. But I know when the next kid will tell them or any other boys, hey, I want to be in the NBA, they ain't going to laugh. They're not going to laugh. They're going to say, hey, I know a guy that made it. So I'm sure I'm sure you're going to make it, and you're going to be even better than that guy. And that's just who I am. That's why, I do clinics. I go back home. I have a direct contact with kids, especially kids, because I want to change their mind. Everything. My life it's not easy still. My father is here. He knows, we went through a lot. We haven't spent Christmas together since I came here because I was going to school. I couldn't really speak English at all at the time. So it's a long story. I don't want to say all of that, but it's just who I am. I want to get back to the community, whether it's in Venezuela, here in D.C., Maryland, Virginia area, because I want to live in a better world, and it's important to people. It's important for people to know that by working hard, by doing the right thing, you can help others too. So that's what life is all about. That's what basketball have taught me almost my whole life.
I think I'm canceling my son's hockey lessons and putting him in basketball. But also, tell me, Graves, what are the kids' reactions when you talk to them, when you have been in these trips back to your home country? I know you talk to them about living healthy lives, about the importance of education, but what are their reactions? What kind of questions you get from them? And have you had an opportunity to go back and see a kid, 1 year later, what kind of change has happened in their lives?
I've seen it, and the reception is great because, they sometimes, when I started doing this, they were like, I don't have to go to school. I don't have to, you're on TV every day. You're on magazines. Everybody talks about you. You're the best. You're the best. And I tell them, it's more than that. Getting an education is very, very important because it give you a knowledge of life. Being in the NBA sometimes can go, in a different direction because you make money, you have a high lifestyle, you have access, and if you don't get an education, sometimes you can't really handle all that and manipulate all that. So you need some type of knowledge. You need some knowledge. So school give you that, and plus, school always gonna be there for you. Like, I can only play basketball for 10 years. I'm 25 years old right now, so I'm gonna be 35, and I want to have a family. And what's after that when you're done playing? So you need a backup plan, which is your education. So that's why I'm trying to tell the kids. Yes, it's cool. I'm in the NBA. I play against Kobe, LeBron, D-Wade, the best players in the world. But more than that, I'm more proud that I got my degree in Maryland, because I know I can live for the rest of my life. Thank you. So that's the main message. That's what I want to get across. You got to go to school. You got to study. You got to see in the first line of your class. You got to pay attention. You got to ask, because if you don't do that, you won't make it to the NBA. There's not that many LeBron James and Kobe and guys that come out of school and just make it right away. No, it's only 3 or 4. So everybody else got to go through the process and go to school, study, pay attention, and just living a healthy life. And one thing I learned also is just basketball is not everything. It's a game. So at the end of the day, you're a human being. You wanna hang out with your friend. You wanna hang out with your family. You wanna spend time with your family. So family, parents are very, very important on kids' growth. Mom and dad always gotta be there for them and guide them, because we are like I'm just like my dad. Like I'm his mirror, and that's why I think the reason I'm what I'm at right now is because of my family, my mom and dad, and that's important too. So that's another message that I'm trying to get across.
Thank you so much. That's a great message for young people in challenging situations in particular. I'm going to turn now to Alvaro Maldonado. We have representatives from all fields here, and Alvaro has, based on your experience with dance schools in El Salvador and other countries, tell us what kind of impact can dance have in the lives of youth. In particular, in El Salvador, as Elmer was saying, gangs is a big problem.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor for me to be here. I'm a dancer, but I'm not dancing today, so don't worry, unless you start playing some music. The impact that these programs are intended to have is the same impact that arts, education, and dance had in my life, and that's how I drive the programs, and that's how I design the programs. I grew up in the middle of a civil war in El Salvador, so it's unimaginable that I will be sitting here with you today when I was 8 years old, thinking and hiding from bullets, dreaming about a dance career. So it is unimaginable that I will be sitting here for you, enjoying a fulfilling career as a dancer, when many nights I didn't think that I was going to make it to the next day, because we were hiding from bullets for months and months at a time in a war that I didn't understand. So for me to dream that I wanted to be a dancer, and for me to be able to even imagine to help anybody else, I had to have something that other kids didn't have, and that was the passion for arts and dance, and it was a role model. When I was about 8 years old, I was a beneficiary of a USAID program. That it was an arts program. It was a very short program. It was probably about 2 days program, and that made me realize that somebody out there, somewhere in the world, somebody cared about me. Somebody was investing time and money and effort on telling me that I was important, that I was valuable. So I grew up in one of the most dangerous areas in El Salvador, where the more gang activity is reported all the time. So my friends were gang members. Some of my high school mates are in jail, or they had teenage pregnancies, or any other kind of difficulty lives. And I just remember thinking, this cannot be my life. This cannot be my life. I had to do something that can get me out of here. So I started dancing, not thinking that there was going to be a way out. But I got a contract with an international dance company when I was 14. And since I was 14, I have never stopped receiving a paycheck as a dancer since that time. And I'm so proud of that. Thank you. Thank you. So one of the main things that these programs do is exactly that. We use the power of dance to transform the lives of these teenagers. We try to use dance as a tool of education to tap into the power and believing in themselves. And we are targeting students and populations that are not the regular students. These are people who do not respond to the regular educational systems. Dance and music, it's a straight way to their hearts and to their minds. When you're talking to these people, it's important for them to know that I know how they feel. I know how they felt. I know the despair. I know the fear. I understand how they feel. I understand how they think. So we use the dance classes not for them to become a dancers. To be a dancer, unfortunately, you have to go to school for 8 years, and you have to dance for 8 hours, and even like that, you still can get a job. Uh, so it's not a matter of creating dancers. It's a matter of using dance as a tool of education. And it's very difficult for us to make policymakers to understand that arts, it's a good way to educate people. We don't learn in the same way, all of us. We all learn in different ways. So when I was 23, I was in New York, and I read a report that says that Central America was the most dangerous area in the world, where 1 out of 3 teenagers or young men between 15 and 24 years old were dying every day. So I thought that could be me. That could easily be me. I could be one of them. What did I have, and what could I do what did I have in me to not to be one of them, and what could I do to help? So my programs are different than probably their programs, and this is the message that I want to do. They're very small, but if you think about what can a dancer in New York, a ballet dancer can do to change lives, and there's a lot that you can do actually, just to empower people and to tell your story. It's a good thing to do. But I approached USAID. And they founded the first program for me to do transformational dance training programs in El Salvador. These programs, they were about 8 weeks long, and it was about connecting and partnering with other nonprofit organizations who work with youth at risk, and for us to bring Americans, teachers and dancers as an international cultural exchange between El Salvador and the US. I believe that arts have the ability to transcend geographic and linguistic barriers. And it's a very easy way for us to communicate with each other, regardless of where we come from or what language we speak. These programs are intended for us to achieve behavioral changes in these people and this youth, and for them to continue working.
Thank you so much. I think it's, the impact of your program is amazing. And obviously we thank our partners at USAID who are co-sponsoring this event with us today, because the work they do along with us has tremendous impact in youth. And as you know, youth is one of the most important populations in our countries, in the countries in our region, because we have at least 30% of youth demographics in the countries in the region. And some of them are living in very dire circumstances. The programs, the efforts, the kind of efforts that you guys all have for the region are making an impact and helping us reach out to civil society and do things that sometimes, as Chris said, governments cannot do alone anymore. So I thank you all for being here. I can guarantee you that you're going to be hearing from some other countries interested in doing those programs as well as the ones you are. Thank you so very much. And we're moving to the next panel.
All right, so now we're going to welcome our second panel of champions up to the stage. And we're extremely lucky. We have Oliva Lopez, who's a special assistant to the assistant administrator over at USAID. He's going to be moderating our panel this time. So Oliva, come on down as well. And we'll just go ahead and kick things off.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. I wanted to start by asking first Luis Aguirre a question, Dr. Luis Aguirre Torres. Based on your experience in business development and the green business space, what kind of advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs in the region and here in the U.S. who are trying to build companies and develop innovative technologies in Latin America and the Caribbean? What would you say to them? What's based on your experience?
Okay. Well, first of all, let me say I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here. I am honored and humbled by this opportunity, and especially sitting next to these brilliant people, inspiring people, and it is always hard to follow after the kind of conversations we just had. So I'm gonna try to make sense. But Well, the question, what would I tell entrepreneurs that want to enter this space? And I guess the question goes, because I get it often, I guess the question goes to the fact that in Latin America, we tend not to develop technology. We tend to believe that everything has to come from countries like the United States, where everything happens and we just use what they develop. And what I would tell them is that, first of all, it is possible. I mean, we have great minds in Latin America. We have great people. We have people who can see the difference between right and wrong, and people who want to make a change. In the last 3 years, I've been fortunate enough to meet several of those people. I have met a lot of people that all they need a lot of the time is money. And sometimes they need a little push. Sometimes they just need somebody to inspire them. No, just like Alvaro was mentioning. I mean, sometimes they just need to hear your story, and when they hear your story, they realize that it is possible. It comes a time. I mean, for me, it happened a few years ago when I was one of those people that was always complaining, you know, because when I was a kid, I always thought that the future was going to be different, and then my present is the future of that kid, and I'm like, man, this isn't what I'm signing for, you know. I want something different, but I was just saying that, and then one day I had the opportunity to meet the Undersecretary of the UN, who's also a director of the Environment Program, and I said the same thing. I was like, man, this sucks, and he was, yeah, well, do something, and I was like, oh, sure, that's a good point, you know, and that's when I started thinking I can do something here, and I can make a change, and I started promoting the development, the use of clean technology in Latin America, and I started trying to inspire people to join me and create something bigger than what it was, and we've been fortunate enough to get some people to follow and to grow these communities. So what I would say is, like, I mean, half the job is to be there and try it. The other half is going to come with hard work.
And you've been involved in a green business competition in Mexico, I understand, with other partners, and you are trying to basically serve as a mentor and as someone who provides technical assistance to people who are trying to develop green technologies and be innovative. And can you tell us some of these success stories that you've encountered through the challenge?
Yeah, I have encountered amazing people. I mean, you never know what you're gonna get. You know, it sounded very Forrest fun. Sorry, very Forrest-like. But I think that the number of people that have come to this business competition without having any clue about business, but with the desire to do something different, especially in the space that we're in, which is a very novel space where people really want to do good, want to do something different, but a lot of the time they lack the business skills. So they come in and we talk to them. A lot of the time what we try to identify is the passion they have for what they do. And once they have the passion, then the rest is going to be easy, because it's all about teaching them something that they're going to learn. If they're passionate enough about what they do and how they can do it, then they're going to learn it. We have some cases that are, for me, very, very, very important. Some people that, in the first year that we did this, a guy came saying that, I mean, he couldn't come to the place where he was expected to present his proposal because he didn't have any money for the bus. I mean, a bus ride from where he was, which was the other side of Mexico City, which, as you know, it's a huge city. But I mean, it was something that shocked me personally. You know, the fact that a guy had a dream and he wanted to do something, and he just couldn't make it because he didn't have money for the bus. So we talked to him. We persuaded the guy to come to the next round, and we would help him, not only with the money for the bus, but also help him because he didn't have a computer also to put his presentation together. So we started working with him on how to use the computer, how to put his ideas in the computer, and how to present them to people. And I think he learned more than business. He learned more than what he wanted to do, whether it was viable or not. I think what he learned was that he just needs to try, and he needs to rely on people who've been there before, and that can help him. And there are a lot of us, thank God, in Mexico doing this.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that story. And now I want to turn to Ana. We were talking yesterday, and I was learning more about your work, and it sounds fascinating. But you came to the United States when you were 13, and you studied here, and then decided to go back to Guatemala to address issues of gender violence and women's education. Can you tell us more about how you started your organization, Mujer?
Yes, so at age 13, I became very aware of the civil war in Guatemala. I'm a baby of the civil war. I was born during the worst years of the war, yet I was in a cocoon. My parents really struggled to keep my brother and I away from the violence that was going on during that time. And when I came here and I realized where I was from, it was funny, my first day in a public school in San Francisco, the teacher, as a newcomer, he asked, "So where are you from?" And I had to think really hard that I was actually from Guatemala. I had never really gotten out of my country to really think that I was from a different country. And here I was. And so it was my senior year of college. I had done a lot of social justice type service through Loyola Marymount, a Jesuit university. And I had studied abroad in India. And one of my professors said, "I heard a story on NPR about a group of women sex workers and they were playing soccer." I had played soccer throughout high school. I grew up playing soccer in my neighborhood. And so I thought, I want to meet these women. I want to go back home. That's when I thought, I really need to go back home because I felt hypocritical doing work abroad, but not where I was born and not where I come from. So I went back to my room and I told my roommate that the story that my teacher had told me, and she's like, "I'm gonna go with you." And Tania Torres and I moved that summer. We worked 3 jobs. One of them was with Amnesty International, where I learned a lot. And then we took our savings from that summer, went in August, and we were committed for 1 year to get to know the women sex workers of the Red Light District of La Línea in the city.
That's very impressive. And can you tell us more about the kind of impact and the kind of change you've seen in these women, and perhaps tell us a little bit more about how you work with them and the kinds of advice and assistance that you provide?
So we committed 1 year. 1 year for me became 5 years. I realized that I went down there with a very Western mindset. I said, I want to teach these women how to read and write, because that's what Susie Sika, a 40-year-old mother of 8 children, said in the NPR interview. I got there, and that was not a major need for the women. They were worried about housing, about food, about health care for their children, about their children's education, about violence. And there was a lot of rivalry in the women. They were all competing for the same market in the Red Light District. So I decided to drop that idea, and Tania and I started to visit the women, just room by room. There are 250 rooms alongside the train tracks in the city. And so we just dropped by and said, "Hi, how's the weather? Things are great." And then little by little, we were like, they started to share about their partners. We started to share about our love stories as 22-year-olds, about immigration. I, as an immigrant to the U.S., Tania, as a first-generation Mexican-American in the U.S., and so those stories were the foundation for the trust that we developed in the community. And so little by little, when they started sharing more, they also started to share their dreams. And some of those dreams were about learning how to do hair, going to beauty school. So we got 2 scholarships, and the deal that we made with the community was that 2 women were gonna go to a beauty school, come back and teach their co-workers what they had learned. And so that's how we started our first project. And then somebody else said, "I wanna learn how to read and write." And we were like, oh wow, that was like our first idea. And now here it is coming, being a reality. Yet those classes, the educational and the vocational classes, are really for us the hook for political empowerment, the hook for self-esteem and emotional development. And so that's how we do it. Now we have an empowerment center about 8 to 10 blocks from the Red Light District, and the women come and chat with each other and just develop the community, and most of our staff are now women sex workers. So it's all about teaching each other. It's all about popular education and having a Paulo Freire type of methodology at the Red Light District, where we recognize that the women are agents of change, and that we recognize that they make a choice also, and we are open to whatever choice that they want to make for themselves, and we just support and facilitate the context of that.
Thank you very much for sharing your story with us. It's very inspiring. Thank you. And finally, Professor Raul Hinojosa Ojeda, you founded the North American Integration Development Center at the University of California in Los Angeles. And you focus your research in trying to develop pilot projects, working with diaspora communities, trying to go back to their home and making an impact there. And I wanted to hear from you, what do you think is the biggest challenges that these communities have to face sometimes, and how do they overcome them?
Well, you know, I first got to say I'm really, really moved and inspired by today, and I think we all should be. Because in many ways, the answer to your question started when I worked in a little closet up on the 5th floor up here, when 19 years ago, when the North American Free Trade Agreement was being discussed. And basically at that point, with President Clinton, a number of us were brought in, and our research back then was essentially the same thing as today. The real issue is that we're having this massive movement of people, and that there's a lot of trade going on, but there's these human movement that are bringing massive talent and value. And in fact, the reality of it is now, 20 years later, the biggest Latin American economy in the world is right here in the United States, all right? And it is actually creating a huge change in this country, demographically, politically, socially, and also how it's going to give back. And in that sense, Chris's comment of, you know, why hasn't the State Department in 223 years thought about this? Frankly, we are all the generation of the champions, by the way. This generation has changed this country. We've already changed it. We've already changed it to now understand its new 21st century reality, that it has to do with its country of origin. And basically, this center was created in part, a bit frankly, it's uncomfortable to say this, but the frustration even of Washington 20 years ago, where there was, you could talk about trade and trade liberalization, but you can't talk about people liberalization and liberation, all right? And the fact that we still, 20 years later, don't have freedom of movement, and we not only have a brain drain, we have a brain loss as people working here without rights, and they can contribute so much more to the economy of this country if we actually go back to the first principles of liberty and justice for all. So I think that began a lot of the research that we needed to now rethink our immigration policies as a part of a transnational perspective. And the fact that, why don't a lot of people come here? Let's think about that. El Salvador, you know, I'm living in El Salvador right now, okay? And, you know, in Oriente, in fact, okay, which is communities where today, when we talk about GDP, 80% of the GDP in these villages is made right here, all right? Right, and they'll probably clean up tonight, you know, when we get out of here. So creating this value, and now, unfortunately, we need another reform, not only immigration reform, but how we deal with remittances. Billions and billions of dollars that was talked a lot about in the conference. But that value is not making a difference yet. It's creating sort of a way to get by. In many ways, it creates the ability for more people to keep coming. We have an incredible opportunity. The close to $90 billion of workers in this country sending money back home. And AIG does a great job. USAID is awesome. I love you guys. But it's a drop in the bucket, right? So they do the hard work. All right, how do we turn that into economic development? That was the other thing we told President Clinton we needed to focus on as a part of a real transnational, connecting the Americas approach. So, you know, we went to create this center, and it wasn't just enough to do research, okay? Great research, I love research. But, you know, after a while you get tenure, you get bored, you have to do something, okay? You have to make it work. And that's where we got into getting out of the classroom. I take my students out, take them to the hood, figure out how does an undocumented family live here and there. Figure it out. Okay, you're so smart. It's hard, okay? So that begins an entire process of thinking about solutions, right? And that's where we started with a number of pilot projects, which have then eventually gone on to create companies, right? You know, somebody said yesterday at the conference that Martin Luther King said, "I have a dream." He didn't say, "I have a strategic business plan." All right, you know, that's what we got to work on.
And I'm really glad that you mentioned the issue of remittances, because I think that's correctly identified as a lot of potential that's lying out there, but we haven't necessarily figured out how to tap that and use it to our advantage to promote economic development in these communities of origin. So I wanted to ask you to tell us more about your ideas. How do you see them playing a role in development?
Well, you know, a lot of this started, you know, and I got to say, you're talking about your dad, okay, who's here. I mean, you know, I grew up in Chicago, and we would, you know, load up the station wagon and drive to Mexico every summer, right? And then you can't help but become a transnational social scientist just to figure out what's going on, right? You know, why is this happening? And then when you get to Oaxaca, which I loved, you know, and I've spent, you know, 30 years working there, you know, how do we do this? How do we really make this transformation? Right now, with incredible sacrifice that people have made, doing these transnational lives, in many cases creating disaggregated families that, you know, why is it a surprise that we have the most violent countries in the world, the 9 most violent countries in the world, what do they have in common? Immigration to the United States. Families disarticulated back home. Okay, barrios here where you're not really here. You're not really part of this yet. Okay, we gotta, you know, you gotta get a little beat up a little first, right? I mean, this is the age-old story. So the question was, but this doesn't make any sense with all this money going back. So we started, and I got to say, this took me on a long journey, working with my business partner, Miguel Kelly, is here, who is sort of interesting. He was born in Chiapas from American missionary parents. And now, so we're like, you know, mirror images of this transnationalism. And we've... Exactly. So we decided to basically we went completely crazy and decided to create a company. Okay? I, you know, worked at Stanford, Berkeley, so everybody's, you know, serial entrepreneurs. So we decided to, you know, get and figure out how do we create a technology company as if people mattered, okay? As if transnational people mattered, right? And that began a process that says these billions of dollars, you know, why, I won't mention any names, do they have to make so much money moving what takes free on the drop of a computer pad for the billionaires to move, all right? So what it took was actually conquering the commanding heights of software and processing, okay? Not in the plan at the moment, but that's what you had to do. You had to create a technology to allow you to use this thing, which everybody's got in their hands, I bet right now, you know, and everybody in El Salvador and Oaxaca now have in their hands, as the medium for really low-cost remittances. But not only that, make it a medium for really low-cost microfinance. And also make it a medium for real low-cost government subsidies to be really targeted who should be getting it in a transparent fashion. We're working on a project right now in El Salvador just by targeting how people get their subsidies through cell phones, through this software that had to be created in order to make something like this happen. You can lower the budget deficit by 25% of one country. I mean, we are on the verge of a fascinating technological conversion. And I think that the diaspora conference, this idea, you know, last year everybody showed up and said, wow, we can't believe we're here. This is fascinating that it's finally come together. This year, people are like, all right, how do we make it happen? How do we use technology in a completely new way? I'm getting a lot of heads going. That's good. So, you know, that's what, in a sense, we have to do. We have to grab hold of the technology because other people control it. champions. Technology doesn't happen by itself, right? There are social forces creating technology. Change makers, we have to take that, burn that midnight oil some more, do the difficult work of, I mean, I know we all want to be hippies on the beach, at least I do, but we got to do that hard work, okay? We got to do that hard work, and that includes harnessing this technology. For really, in this case, I'm just committed to the most, humble of people that I have always worked with, the indigenous people of Mexico who now live in my neighborhood in Venice, the Oaxaqueños and the Salvadoreños that are all in Pico Union. And I got to just say one last thing. This week, on Sunday, I was in jail. Not for any reason like that, but we went to El Salvador, to a prison, all right? That 18th Street gang runs it. Where is 18th Street? 18th Street is in LA, okay? All right, don't forget, 18th Street is LA. We went to the 18th Street prison in Izalco, the site of the 1932 massacre, by the way, where 30,000 Salvadorians were killed, okay? The prison is now a fascinating thing that's going on there, if people haven't heard about it. For 6 months, there's been a peace treaty. Violence has gone down 70% in the country. What used to be the #2 most violent country in the world has now dropped. And in fact, the bond rating is booming, according to Business Week this week, as a result. I'm not quite sure of the correlation. But something is happening, folks. We need to think. It is about, the people that are the product of this transnationalism are coming up with a completely new lessons also. And their lesson is, we got to stop this. We got to stop this violence. We have to do these truces. We have to think about economic development. The gangs in El Salvador, we've analyzed, make $60 million a year doing petty extortion. The country spends $900 million a year in security, supposedly from these folks, okay? We're doing something wrong, all right? And I think that's where the real challenge are. If we really think of, the people who are really needed, and we make it change at multiple levels, it can happen as all champions.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your story, and thank you to all the champions. I wish we could keep the conversation going and hear more about your stories, but we have our next guest. He is the Assistant Administrator for Latin America and the Caribbean at USAID, Mr. Mark Fierstein.
Good morning. Buenos dias. Now, I imagine at the White House, the hardest thing anyone can do would be to follow President Obama to the lectern. The second hardest thing you can do would be to follow the champions change. And it's really, really extraordinary. I'm really speechless in many ways, but it was just so inspiring to hear your stories and the stories from the previous panel, just great presentations. And my staff and I think we've learned so much today from all of you in terms of the contributions that you've been providing to society, the businesses you've started, innovations that you've been propelling. And I think that we're going to be able to take so much back to USAID and figure out ways to replicate what you're doing to really scale it up. Now, as you know, this administration has elevated development as an essential element of U.S. foreign policy. And the Secretary of State often talks about the 3 Ds, defense, diplomacy, and development. And she's underscored that development is as important as those other 2 Ds to advance our national interest. And to underscore his commitment to development, President Obama 2 years ago issued a development policy. He was the first president ever to issue a policy just on development. And if you've not read the policy, I urge you to do so. I'm not sure if the actual policy is available, but you can see his speech online, a speech he gave at the UN General Assembly in September of 2010. And among the things he said in the policy is that the purpose of development is to create the conditions whereby assistance is no longer necessary. And that's really exactly what you guys are doing. What you're doing is it's not charity, it's not philanthropy. You're creating local capacity. You're empowering people to make changes for their own behalf and to ultimately be able to advance on their own. And diasporic communities are obviously uniquely placed to do this. You have language skills, the cultural traditions, professional and personal networks, and the drive to improve things in your countries. Now, at USAID, under Administrator Dr. Shah, we've instituted a number of new reforms to make it easier for us to work with organizations like yours. Because we want to be able to expand the number of groups we work with. We want to work with a more diverse set of organizations. And we recognize that, while there's great expertise in the traditional development community, there is so much expertise beyond and experience, and you represent all that here. We want to be able to bring that in and improve on what Dr. Hinojosa said is our drop in the bucket, because the truth is, with all of you, we're very much more than just a drop in the bucket. We've heard a lot of good examples today about the kind of work that's being done with USAID. I just wanted to mention a couple things that we didn't have a chance to talk about. In Mexico, for example, we're working with business leaders on the border in Ciudad Juarez, business leaders from El Paso and Ciudad Juarez who are investing in at-risk youth, creating educational opportunities to take on the crime challenge there that we just heard about has been so critical in Central America and Mexico. In Haiti, we're making special efforts to work with the diaspora community, and we have a new program in place where we can recruit the diaspora professionals to go back to Haiti and work in ministries there to help them create the capacity and to advance the reconstruction effort. And along those lines, I think you heard yesterday the Secretary announced a new USAID partnership with Accenture and CUSA International, which again will be designed to bring the skills of diaspora and send them to their home countries. For short and medium-term assignments to work to advance development there. And the goal, of course, there, as the Secretary said, is to try to reverse the brain drain and turn it into a brain gain. So I want to thank you again for all of your efforts. We're looking forward to working with all of you. Yes, USAID is a tremendous organization, and again, with all of you, we'll be able to really create some extraordinary change in the United States and abroad. So thanks again. And finally, I'd like to introduce John Carson. John is the director of the White House Office of Public Engagement. He and his staff have been instrumental in organizing this event, so we really owe a great debt of gratitude to him and to his team.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And a big welcome to our champions and the audience and everyone who's following online. I'm here to end today with an ask for each and every one of you. Before I do, I just want to say we do a number of these Champions of Change events here, but this one personally means a lot to me. I've been listening to the stories today. I spent 2 years in Honduras as a Peace Corps volunteer and learned so many lessons, particularly about the connection and the work that you're doing connecting the Americas. I just want to personally thank each and every one of our champions for the work that you're doing. But let me get to the ask. We need you to help us tell this story. We need you to tweet about it. We're using the hashtag WHChamps. If you don't know what a hashtag is, just send me a tweet and I'll let you know. We need you to blog about it. We need you to write about it. We need you to tell 3 people in the grocery store this weekend about the story of our champions, about the story of your own connection to connecting the Americas, about your story of what you can do if you're following online. I ask you to do this for 3 different reasons. First of all, from our champions today, from USAID and from State Department, I'm sure every single one of you here today, even our champions, heard a new idea that you want to share with someone else. This is the #1 way that these good ideas spread, through the networks that each and every one of us here have. The second reason I ask you to help share this story is you heard some really good examples of what smart government can do in partnership with organizations, with individuals, and quite frankly, there's a budget debate going on right now in this country about what are our priorities and what programs do we want to fund. And I think, the reason we started the Champions of Change program is, well, we are having all these debates and arguments over policies and budgets and taxes here in Washington. There are Americans and organizations across this country who are making change happen every single day while we have these arguments. But government can be a partner, and we win these debates not in the abstract, not at the theoretical level. We win these debates when people hear the real concrete stories of how change is being made. So I ask you to share what you saw today and your involvement for that reason as well. But the third and final reason I think is the most important. While we do have thousands of Americans, thousands of organizations standing up and making change, I think one thing we can all agree on, however you fall on the partisan divide of these issues we're grappling with, one thing we can all agree on is that we need more Americans believing they can be part of the change. And when people hear the stories of what our champions have done, when they hear the stories of what each of you are doing, they will wonder, I think I could do that as well. I think I could be part of the change. They can learn from some of the programs that you've put in place. And the number one way that people are inspired to take actions like this is when they hear about someone else who's been able to make a difference. So a big thank you to each and every one of you. Help us spread the word, #WHChamps. And before we go, I'll turn it over to Kyle for just a few more logistical notes as we end today. But thanks again so much to all our champions.
All right. So I just want a reminder, a couple things. whitehouse.gov/champions. Our champions here today took some time and they each wrote blogs, so those will be posted there along with their photos and the work that their organizations do. There will be a YouTube video of today's event. It'll be up in about 24 hours, so for any of you who want to share this event with friends, you can send that around. We'll make sure that you all get that. And just one big last round of applause for our champions of change.